I think this is one of the best looking graphics cards out there. And after I've had a chance to test it out properly, I'm pleasantly surprised by how well it actually works too. Welcome to Machines and More. On this channel, I cover a variety of tech topics, including DIY PC components. Topic today is a graphics card that I checked out at CES earlier this year, and it is finally ready for launch. 5090 ProArt. If you enjoy content like this, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and give a like here. Big thanks. Before we begin, I did need to let you know that Asus provided this test card to me at no cost to the channel. Big thank you to them for their continued support of the review content here. However, they are not paying for this video, and as with all content here on the channel, this is a product of my independent research and testing. Now, I do have to apologize up front. I did not have very much time to do the testing for this card before it has to go back because of my Computex and my travel plans, and I would have liked to test out this cooler design in a case like the Fractal Terra, but I just can't get to it in the limited time that I have with it. So I am hoping that I can check it out again in a few months after it's made the rounds to other reviewers. ProArt is Asus's creator-focused branding. The components feature classy aesthetics and cleaner designs. And if there's any lighting, it's often just a small logo, and this one actually doesn't have any lighting. The GPUs have a good following amongst SFF enthusiasts, as the ProArt cooler sizes tend to be more reasonable in size, and they're not small form factor GPUs by any means, but just typically smaller relative to the current landscape. Now, to do that with the 5090, there has to be a few tricks because we're talking about a ton of power going into a card that's not much bigger. You know, this is the 5080 ProArt, and this is just a little bit wider. Ray traced Cyberpunk here at 1440. The 5090 ProArt is averaging north of 550 watts. Even if you aren't doing RT, the card will still draw down a hefty amount, around 470 to 480 watts. While a 1000 watt plus power supply would be optimal, do take note of your 12 volt 2x6 power cable that's included with the power supply. A lot of them are rated for 600 watts. It'll say right on the connector where it would be suitable for this card, but some are 450 watts. And even with 75 watts coming from your slot, you're not going to have enough for the max spec draw of 600 watts. So do pay attention to that. Now, I won't rehash benchmarks at this point. 5090 is a known quantity, so this wouldn't be much value added. And this clock speed here, you know, it's similar to the Founders Edition card, but just to give you an idea why you might consider a 5090, one is if you want to get a big visual quality improvement. Ray traced Ultra here, no DLSS, you will get consistent 60 plus FPS. If you're not into RT necessarily, or you don't play an RT title, you can chase some higher FPS numbers even at Ultra setting. This is just Cyberpunk for reference. Unlike the ProArt 5080 and 5070 Ti, which were launched last year, the 5090 needs a different cooler design in order to maintain the 2.5 slot form factor. The 5090 still has the black and gold, elegant color scheme, wood trim on the cooler, but the big difference is the 5090 features a dual flow-through cooler, a la the NVIDIA Founders Edition cooler that NVIDIA uses on their 5080 and 5090 cards. And it also uses 2 larger fans versus the 3 small fans on the 5080. 2.5 slots is identical to other 5000 series ProArt cards in thickness. The cooler is 14 millimeters wider at 140 millimeters to accommodate 115 millimeter fans versus the 92-ish millimeter ones here. The length is the same, 304 millimeters. Big fans will have a better noise profile. A lot of GPUs nowadays will have one section of the heatsink overhanging the PCB to allow the fans to pass air straight through that section, like on the 5080 right here. But this side, it's trickier because you usually have the board here, the PCB is connected to the I/O, so in order to pull off the dual flow-through design, you need a special PCB, and this one's going to feature a PCB similar to the Founders Edition card. So that left side fan is not covered by the PCB, and you can see directly through it. You can pass air through that heatsink, and you see these 2 big cutouts on the back plate. Now, this is going to be much more efficient for air movement versus forcing the air to deflect off the PCB and then squeeze out the sides like a more conventional card here. Now the flow through is much more akin to a tower cooler passing air directly through from one side to the other, for example. Other optimizations, the heatsink features a vapor chamber section where it contacts the die. Instead of thermal paste, they use liquid metal, like with the FE cards. There is 9 heat pipes here on the black heatsink, and you pick up the 59A ProArt, you know it's incredibly dense. It weighed in at over 400 grams more than the 5080. So it is ProArt targeted at the creator, so I did some video editing workloads first to test it out in my M3 video editing system here. 59A with 32 gigs of GDDR7 has twice the VRAM of the 5080, and you can see here it's drawing down about 170 watts more than the 5080. Temps are pretty darn good still, a little bit higher than the 5080, but this is still very good for consuming that much more power. Fan speeds hovered in at around 1500, which is almost 50% PWM here, not loud. Now we'll note that I have an inverted setup, it favors the GPU, and I have case fans directly over the card, which helps the card intake. I would really recommend doing that, placing the case fans next to the card when you have the capability to, with at least a small air gap, and the 2.5 slot thickness makes that much more doable. My setup here is with an undervolted 9950X running at 150 watt max on a 240 AIO. I discussed this experimental bottom exhausting AIO setup recently, and yes, I did have to switch out the Chromax G2s for the regular G2s since I had to use them for another build that you'll see soon, but these work the same. Intuitively, I thought that having the GPU directly exhausting into the AIO would be bad for the CPU temps, and while the CPU temps are slightly elevated at slightly higher rad fan speeds, remember we do have an extra 170 watts being dumped into the case. So is it markedly worse to have the card directionally dump its exhaust versus just scattering it all into the case? Not really, as long as there is space for it to do so here. And in fact, I think one of the reasons that this works so well here is because the rear exhaust. So the hot exhaust can go directly into this area, and then the fan can work more effectively at pushing out the hot air because it's all right here. And when it was running, I put my hand back here and you could really feel it cooking back here. So this rear exhaust was key. Temps on the 5090 FE tend to come in at around mid 70s. So from what I can see here, this cooler is going to perform similarly, and they've also got the same 115 millimeter fan size. On the topic of airflow, because this airflow design relies on air being able to move past this backplate for cooling, you do really want to be cautious about how you place the card. So set up like this, where there is a large amount of room for the exhaust to be dumped, is ideal. Many of you will have bigger cases and it'll work fine as long as there is room. A sandwich style setup where you can't give a meaningful air gap in addition to exhaust fans, close proximity to where this is exhausting, such as, your stock Fractal Terra, that would not be ideal for the card or the motherboard, which has its back up against the exhaust of the card. There are a few mods where you can flip the card so it exhausts out of a sandwich style case, and cases like FormD T1 where you can configure an air gap. There's plenty of ways to make this type of dual exhaust work in a sandwich style case, but the key point here is be thoughtful about it, right? Don't stick this into a setup where this exhaust side is blocked off and expect it to work well. The reason why you'd want to go 5090 versus 5080 is if you are regularly doing big production workloads. Here I processed a roughly 15-minute color-graded 7K Canon RAW file down to 4K DCI ProRes 422HQ, as some editors might do in preparation for editing, and it can do that in 70% of the time. That does draw down significantly more power for less duration, in whole taking a little bit more total GPU energy to do the same task. If you were processing for final delivery, you might transcode to H.265, and here the ProArt 5090 can do that in 66% of the time. So when you do have a lot to process in little time, otherwise the 5080 will handle this stuff just fine as well. The 5080's VRAM usage was about 50% of its total capacity in this test. If you're running big complex 3D models or big local LLMs, that's when you're really going to need that extra VRAM, and you definitely won't need 32 gigs for gaming, because 16 gigs is plenty right now. As noted, this isn't undervolted CPU for these tests. I'm only drawing down 86 watts or so here on the 9950X. So we're pushing well into the mid 70s for gaming here. It's not the end of the world, but I would like to see lower, especially with this little power draw. If your gaming power draw is typically higher, or if you are running single CCD Ryzen like a 9850X 3D, I do anticipate that temp to be getting into the red zone. So where CPU thermals are critical, I'll show you a different way to do it in the M3. I flipped the radiator fans to intake at the bottom, and because that means the center open area of the case is going to be where the hot exhaust coalesces, I added side panel exhaust to push the air out the side. So, you know, placement wise, try not to direct this at yourself in this scenario, push it away, into the open air. If you're running a side panel radiator, you can also just run that as intake and make sure you have exhaust fans on the opposite side of the GPU. It's the same idea. You can do that pretty simply in a case like the NR200 with top exhaust and a bottom intaking GPU. With the same RPMs, I could then drop my CPU temps a significant amount while keeping more or less the same GPU temps. And this type of setup really makes sense when you have a disproportionately power-hungry card versus your CPU power draw. So this is a sound level that you can expect when you're gaming. The fans on the GPU are at 1500 RPM. These are bigger fans, so noise profile is not very bad. And the rad fans, like I mentioned, about 1200 RPM on these Noctua G2s. One thing, this isn't unique to this particular card. You will often hear it with plenty of high-end, high-powered GPUs nowadays, but I did note some coil inductor resonance or whine here. And this is with a quality 850 watt SFX power supply. So this is noticeable, especially when you're running a noise optimized fan setup like this. It's going to vary from card to card. I've only tested one of these, so to conclude that all of them are going to do this, I can't do that, but just be aware this could be an issue if you are noise sensitive. You can try undervolting it. That's definitely one way to get around it. In my experience, that tends to help, but just for your awareness. So this is all very impressive. This cooler handles 300 plus watts, and this guy 500 plus watts, and it's not that much bigger. So the cooler design, while it very much piggybacks off of the FE style PCB and that cooler, is mission accomplished by Asus. And I like also that the slot here for the 12-volt cable is angled and recessed, takes up less horizontal space, looks very elegant here. A couple other things to note on the ProArt. At the back, you will have one fewer display port because that is replaced with a USB-C port. Will it matter if you use a USB-C monitor? That means no adapters, which is nice. Or if you want to use a VR setup, that can work. But I know in some fringe cases, you actually do need that third display port. The Type-C also doesn't do anything other than display, so just be aware of that. So overall, well-built and very well-designed card. I'm pleasantly surprised with how well this works. There's a lot of neat engineering tricks here, but this is a very difficult time to launch a card. GPU prices are generally high. We are 1.5 years into the cycle. That big question mark for me would be pricing. Asus did not have an MSRP to disclose ahead of the availability on their e-commerce site, which is going to happen soon. And if I had to guess, seeing that 5080 ProArt is a little bit lower than Astral, I'd expect this around the $3,700 US mark. That's where the market is now, unfortunately. Only if you need something like this, this would be 2x of the ProArt 5080, more than 2x. Is it more than twice as performant versus the 5080? Depends on if you need the VRAM for your workflow, but typically speaking, no. Do I need this for my personal video editing workflow? Heck no. And I'm kind of glad I don't, because this is a very difficult time to get into a high-end GPU. So that'll do it for this first look here. Big thanks to Asus for the support. As mentioned, I do want to revisit this in different cases if I can check it out again. But hope this info is helpful to you. I'd love your support. Make sure you give a sub, give a like. If you're shopping, please consider using the links down below. Big thanks for watching today.